Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths, these badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession, this podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome back to another episode of Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time. I'm your co-host, Stacey Eldridge. And tonight I have with me the beautiful Becky Passmore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
We've got a special episode for you tonight as we continue to dive into the digital forensics of the Casey Anthony case. If you've been listening, you might have caught the hints, and we've got a guest tonight. Becky, who do we have?
So tonight we are very fortunate to have a defense expert with us to talk about this case. We have Larry Daniel. We're very excited to chat with him because many people did not even realize that the defense even had their own digital forensic expert. It's a logical assumption since the defense did not put their expert Larry Daniel on the stand, but rest assured he was working tirelessly behind the scenes, and now we're going to get the insider knowledge straight from him.
Larry, let me start the first question off with, can you tell us what your job or your position was when you were approached to work on the Casey Anthony, or I guess maybe I'm assuming you were approached to work on the Casey Anthony case? How did that all start?
Well, oddly enough, it all began with Nancy Grace.
Okay.
Happened to catch her program, didn't know who she was, and just watching her program and the way she approached the whole top mom thing and just her vehemence and demonization, it compelled me to have Leslie Kaufman, who worked in our office, contact Jose's office and say, have you got a defense expert because you're going to need one? And as it turned out, he did not have one.
Okay.
And that's where I got to go work on the Casey Anthony case for the next couple of years.
How long had you been doing like digital forensics work / even doing defense work?
I started in 2000.
Okay. Oh, so you were closer to a decade then because she was arrested and everything in 2008. And do you recall, was it like 2008 or 2009 when you volunteered?
2009 would be closer to it.
Okay. So it'd been going on for a little bit. All right.
So Larry, what's the 5-second overview of what you've been doing in the last 14 years since that trial?
Well, since that trial, because I think that back then, that was also the early days of mobile forensics.
Yep.
So I had gotten started in mobile forensics probably a year or two before that. And in the 14 years since, I wrote 2 books. I've probably testified an additional 80 times, maybe 85.
Oh my goodness.
Collected 10 different certifications. Taught hundreds of presentations on different aspects of digital forensics to attorneys, prosecutors, public defenders, whomever. Worked with a lot of different people, met a lot of great people. It's been fun. And I had an internet radio show called Blog Talk Forensics, which you can still catch on iHeart. It's on iHeartRadio now, believe it or not. It was also on iTunes.
Okay. Now, Larry, when you said you'd work the case, did you know how big it would be when it actually got to trial?
I had no idea that it was going to turn into the circus that it turned into. Because after I got involved in it, I actually started watching Nancy Grace, and only because it was interesting to see. And this was something that just kind of honestly messed with my head a little bit because I'm all about integrity and ethics.
Right.
And the number of people who got onto the defense team just to get inside information to go sell it and then get off the defense team was just, as they say down here in the South, it would grind my gears, man, I tell you. It just made me mad that people would do that. They're like, oh, I'm going to go. And then they go sell pictures or whatever they get their hands on.
Wow.
If somebody wanted to make money, I had everything. I had every picture, every video. I had her all her friends' phones. I had all the computers. I had everything. Man, I should have got rich. But as it turns out, and I don't know if this ever came out or not, but the cost to defend her for the people who got paid, and I wasn't one of them, cost about $600,000. And that was all made by selling pictures and things to the media. So the defense team was selling, and the family was selling things, making money, and making money on interviews to pay for her defense.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. So when did you start working on the case?
Probably not too long after I got involved. Because Sandra Osborne, she was working the case as the primary and under the supervision of Sergeant Stinger. So I started getting her reports, and I got copies of the hard drives that they had at the time. That's when I started working on it. So, and I'm trying to remember the exact date, but I had a meeting with Jose in Denver at the American Association of Forensic Science. They were having a big meeting out there. So I went to that meeting. I did have a meeting with Jose and a bunch of the forensics people. The guy from John Jay College that was one of the criminologists was there. The blood guy was there, the entomologist, a bunch of other folks. And all that effort I went to go to Denver and end up meeting with Jose for like 15 minutes.
Wow. Oh, really?
Which he could have done that over the phone, right? But it was important to meet with him. Because at that time, and I'm trying to remember what year that was, but it was at least a year before trial. And I had already done the work database thing, had already done the net analysis work because Sandra had already done the net analysis work. So we knew how many visits to the chloroform site there were. I had already found the other internet history from Internet Explorer and things like that for things that never came out in trial. So there were a lot of how to
that
make
was one of our questions.
Weapons. Yeah.
Always wondering as we're listening to the testimony, was it really only Firefox? They didn't use any other browsers? There wasn't any other internet history?
Oh, there was Internet Explorer history.
Okay.
Which had things on it for how to make household weapons or how to make weapons from household objects. Then there was the foolproof suffocation part that came out, which was supposedly George looking for how to kill rhododendrons or something. I don't know. Or rats in his rhododendrons. I forget. But anyway, that was in there. And one of the things that I noticed was that there was just stuff in the Internet Explorer history that regarding Universal Studios down there and things like that. And then other things that came out later on, but I don't think it was relevant. And I'm not sure I even could validate it. So, but yeah, the big thing was the internet searches because, and I tried to go to the website that they were from. And what happened is when it came out that website was involved, because it was just a weird little it was a chemistry website. That guy got so overwhelmed with traffic that he probably went broke and had to take it down.
Wow.
But anyway, here's what I remember, and this is what was stuck in my brain the whole time. And this never came out at trial, but I explained it to Jose because what happened was, and the chart you guys were going to ask me about, I think later on, was a chart that I created for Jose to use at trial that showed the actual what was going on with that browser. And what it was, Casey was obsessed with MySpace. MySpace was big back then. I had several cases involved in MySpace. And she had gone to MySpace 81 times. Somebody, I don't know if it was her or someone else, went to that website that had that one page that contained chloroform, sat on it for 54 seconds, and went to MySpace again. So that was the only chloroform search or visit ever that was found on this computer. So that's hardly, in my mind, enough to establish that somebody's learned how to make chloroform from a web page that they sat on for 54 seconds, and they did not print, they did not screenshot it, they did not save it. So I think, quite frankly, it was much ado about nothing.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned Jose. Is he who you mainly dealt with on the legal team, or who were you interacting with and like doing the updates and sharing the report and asking, well, what do you want to do next?
Only Jose. I only worked with Jose during that time. And it was interesting because I think you were going to ask me, I know you're going to ask me, why didn't I testify? So here's one of the things. Well, one of the things that happened, which was interesting to me, is that we had a guy who was going to testify at trial. And in order to testify, you had to be on the witness list. And originally, I was on the witness list, and then Jose took me off because this was Jose's first capital trial. He'd never been through a capital trial, and by then I'd already done 10, I think. And so he was very nervous about what I might get asked if I went to trial to testify, because he and I talked about a lot of things during my time with him. And I spent time with him in Orlando on multiple occasions. We did a lot of talking about the case. And so I think he got to the point where he felt like I knew too much about the case, which if you understand how it really works, at trial, they can't really ask you things outside of the report much. I mean, they can't just go off on a tangent and start asking me about, well, what did you and Jose talk about at lunch?
Right. Exactly.
Well, Jose got kind of nervous about it. So we found this other guy, or he found this other guy that's going to testify, who was actually a PhD, smart dude. And so they put him on the witness list. But apparently he also did some work for the sheriff's department down there, who informed him that this is what I understand. This is maybe fifth hand information, but my understanding is that he was told that if he testified for the defense, he'd never work for law enforcement. And that's the way it always was. In my dealings with a lot of law enforcement, it's like it was one side or the other. You couldn't go and do anything else. And if you testified for the defense, you were a great betrayer. So you couldn't work for them anymore.
Did you ever speak to Casey Anthony?
No, I didn't. I never met Casey. I only saw her from a distance. I spoke to Cindy Anthony one time for just to say hi, but she was pretty high strung, I guess. So I did do a laptop. I did do that, a desktop. I did another desktop that was never given to law enforcement. I had her phone, and I had all the friends' phones. You remember there were a lot of friends that there was all this texting going on and a bunch of other stuff. So for some reason, I got all the phones and imaged them. And looked at all the phones. And some of what I did was recover media and provide that back to the defense teams, movies and pictures and things from that case.
You received all of that evidence through discovery, and then you just analyzed it and then provided the results, all doing this all on your own time.
I mean, if I think somebody's getting railroaded, I'm going to help them, whether they have the money or not. And I've done that. And she was one of probably the larger cases I did that like that. And it wasn't because it was Casey Anthony. It was just because it was somebody who, and you can thank Nancy Grace for this, who I thought was getting railroaded. I mean, according to her, she was going to burst into flames at any moment in time anyway. And right up until the bitter end, all of the media was like, oh, she's going to get convicted. She's going to burn at the stake. It was interesting the day that she got acquitted. But the thing that I wanted to say is that, and I think you'll find this interesting, is I've done a lot of computer work over the years. And one of the things, if you do computer forensics or cell phone forensics, one thing you know is that when you start digging around at people's computers, you're basically digging around in their brain. That's what they do. That's what they're interested in. That's where they go. That's what they buy. And I've had cases where a lot of what I pulled out of the computer was the psychology of the person to provide to the defense. And the reason I say that is that as I went through all of the computer stuff, I never saw anything suspicious. So you can think it should be suspicious. And I did think there should be suspicious stuff in there. And I'm looking for it, I promise you. I never saw any of the weird things that you see in capital cases a lot of times.
Interesting. Did you receive the written reports from Stinger and Osborne? I know from testimony, Osborne definitely wrote one, and did you get that one? And did Stinger write one? And did you get one from him?
I believe I remember getting reports from them. And what's interesting, and I didn't really find this out until a lot later, one of the big questions in the case was about clock time and whether or not it was checked and what was the offset. Because one of the first things we all learn in any kind of forensics is first thing you do is check the clock against the real world clock and see what the offset is.
Yes.
So you know how to handle the timestamps, right? And what I never received was that one report that had that in it, because I looked for it. And I dug through files, and there were hundreds of pages of discovery in Jose's office. And I dug through them trying to find that one report that would give me that offset, and I never did find it. And I didn't find it until after the case was over. I was back down there, and I said, Jose, I never did find this report from Sandra about this font. He said, oh, I got it. It's right here. I said, well, it's a lie. And remember, I wasn't present for the testimony at the trial. I was in Orlando, and I think at the time, I can't remember what the Zoom equivalent was back then, GoToMeeting or something like that. But one of the attorneys,
Skype, maybe.
no, it wasn't Skype.
Okay.
But it was something like GoToMeeting. And
yeah.
And they had it set up in the courtroom. So when I was in the safe house, I could communicate with them. So not with Jose, but with the attorney who was operating it, who would send me questions and I'd send back answers.
I was wondering if you did anything real time during the trial and how you did that. So that answers that. Was he doing it on his BlackBerry? Because I saw the person, I think it was behind Jose. A guy was sitting there and you could see him. I'm like, dude, are you even listening to the trial? So maybe he was typing you questions then.
No, it was actually a female attorney
Okay.
who was really a great attorney. Was she an attorney or a psychiatrist? Anyway,
she was a female attorney.
Yeah, and she was the one that was operating.
Okay, so I don't know what that dude was doing. And I think it was I could always see him on the defense side, but maybe he was sitting on the prosecution. I don't know what he was doing on his phone the whole time now then still.
So did you receive the extracted, recovered, deleted internet history file to analyze as well?
You mean the actual file that was just the MortDB or whatever? Yeah. So when they sent me the hard drive, and I had that, and then not long after that, or maybe even at the same time, I got in addition to that, the MortDB, they had carved out an unallocated space. Mm-hmm. And I got the report about them carving it out of unallocated space. And attached to that was their net analysis report.
Okay, that was, my next question. Did you get the net analysis report?
I did.
And so was that one generated? It sounded like they generated two, or maybe they reformatted it, because it sounded like in the testimony, Osborne created a net analysis report and then Stinger had a net analysis report.
Yeah, I think they did reformat it, or maybe they narrowed the scope.
The columns. Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe even the scope of how many records would have been in it, because you don't need a month's worth of net analysis. Yeah, it's 1,000 pages. So they probably just reduced the size of the report.
Right. And then at the same time, did they give you that cashback report, or did that come on like later down the road?
I actually don't remember seeing the cashback report.
Did Bradley create a written report, and what did it say?
Well, it was a Canadian expert report that said the will state of, I think, John Bradley, I think is his name. And then he went on to talk about a little bit of his credentials, what he does, and then the fact that he had was the author of Cashback, and that he had parsed that file, and this was the result of parsing the file. And he wrote that report, I think, before he got the big surprise that his report was wrong.
Now, do you have any idea why Bradley testified about that cashback report? Because the way it comes off in the testimony and what he's saying was he didn't generate that cashback report. Stinger generated that cashback report. And so he was testifying about a report that somebody else went click to generate on. Is that right? Or tell us more about that.
I don't know. I didn't hear the testimony. And the reason for that is, even though I was in Florida and I was not on the witness list and I was not allowed to go in the courthouse,
right?
You had to be on the list to get in the courthouse. Jose still thought he might try to call me the witness. So they kept me sequestered from that standpoint. So I didn't watch it on TV or anything. I always communicated with the attorney via our little connection.
Well, maybe you can answer it based more on just your knowledge of what he said in his written report about like why he was testifying about Stinger's cashback.
Well, it wasn't clear in his report to me that he was going to testify about Stinger's cashback. It was the way I read his report, he was going to testify about his analysis of it. In any event, it's kind of funny. I don't know how he would have parsed the database without creating a report using his software, because that would be nonsensical, right? So he had to have been able to at least create a report. I don't think that he had a copy of the database, though, when he left to go back to Canada. after he parsed it. And I don't know that he really even thought much more about it after that, because it wasn't, he's in wherever he is in Canada. It's not Orlando, so he's not seeing Nancy Grace every night, and he's not seeing people marching back and forth in front of the house. Um, so I don't know. I just know that I read his report, and I was surprised that he said 81 visits, and I'm going like, this doesn't make any sense to me. That's what I saw, and that's what I remember from his written report.
Oh, so he was talking about some of the data in the report itself then?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we know there was quite a few pieces of evidence and quite a bit of data there. Describe at a high level your methodology for digging into it. Like, where did you start and how did you approach it?
I did the way I do every analysis. I mean, first thing you do is you have to go through and do all the processing, right? So whether you're using, I never used FTK back then. I didn't in later years, but
You were
when I
an
first
NK
started out,
shop.
that's right. I was an NK shop and net analysis, and Microsoft shop. Because when I started doing forensics, you did it by hand. You didn't have NKs or anything. You just had to know where it was and how to parse it out. But anyway, NKs was back then was a lot easier to use than it is today. I mean, pre-NK7, it was a heck of a tool, but it was pretty easy to work with. It was easy to go through and do things with. But NKs was not, a really automated tool. I mean, it was something that you could do stuff with it, but if you wanted to dig in, you had to go find what you wanted to dig in, and then you had to do it using NKs as your hammer and saw, but you still had to be the brain, right? So the only artificial intelligence involved with me. But I would have gone through and I would have done all the file recovery that you typically do. Because in case it does depend on the file system, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but it automatically recovers some deleted stuff. And then you have to go through and do manual carving if you want to, or whatever. So you would always go through and carve a certain kind of number files, right? And Ncase had this beautiful thing where you could go in and do filtering, and you could go through and set up little routines to run. So if you wanted to go get all the media files, you could go get all the media files, right? And you could exclude certain kinds because they were going to be garbage. You could go through even and recover the printer files and things like that, which is what I did, because to me it was important to know if anything got printed. And as it turns out, it was important to know whether or not anything got saved or screen printed or printed from that website. So when the term chloroform came up as being such a big deal, I went back through numerous times and did keyword searches for chloroform and did all through unallocated space and everything else and looking for anything related to it, right? And the thing about it too is that when you go through and look at the way that Google does stuff, and it still does it, but back then it was even more obvious when somebody typed in a word and misspelled it, and then Google would correct it. Well, you get two internet history records for that, the idiot one and then the corrected one. So, and that's where some of the interesting internet history came from in the Anthony case was misspellings. So somebody would go in and misspell a word and then Google would correct it. And then, you get an opportunity at that point to click on a link to go to a site, right? Where it's been corrected. So you may go in there and type in a word and misspell it maybe fairly radically, and Google will correct it, and you'll go somewhere you didn't intend to go because you just clicked on the link, right? I'm not saying that happened, but in the case of the chloroform, I know it was initially misspelled anyway, and then Google corrected it. Somebody clicked on the link, and that's where they went. And then right after that, they went to MySpace. So, and the vast majority of the internet history on those computers, no matter which browser it was all MySpace.
Now, what was your approach to finding and actually recovering that deleted MORC database that had that Mozilla Firefox history in it? Did you just go and repeat the steps that law enforcement did, or did you start completely blind? Tell us about that.
Sanders' report was pretty detailed, as they all were back then, and still should be. But when they carved it from unallocated space, they give you the offset of where they found it on the hard drive, right? Because it's not somewhere you can just oh, hey, go to this directory. It's in unallocated space. So they give you a file offset. So I went to the file set and I decided that I would carve more than she had carved. And you were doing it manually. So you could select, I want to start here and end there. So that's what I did. I just carved what she had plus on both ends. And when I did that, I got about 15 more records out of the More database than they did, but they were not relevant records. They were just tailing records.
Yep. Now we were talking about this when we were prepping, and I found this fascinating. You were talking about how the More database worked, and I said, well, so since you found more records, did they miss a little bit at the top, like they didn't get start at the header, or did they not go all the way to the footer? So do you want to go into some techie details about that?
Sure. So most everybody today that does forensics is definitely going to be familiar with the SQLite database, right? Now, SQLite database is a standard, traditional, relational database, okay? So every table relates to another table, basically. So when you look at a table, you're going to find foreign keys that tell you how to find things, right? And how to look up, a record that is related to this table in another table. So when you get all those tables together through those foreign keys, you come up with a record that means something. Okay. That's how we understand it. So, and most people are familiar with Microsoft Excel. And if you look at a database, it looks sort of like Excel.
Right.
You have rows and columns, except that in a database there are fields instead of cells. And now it comes to more. It looks nothing like anything a sane. What's the right way to put it? Unintoxicated person would look at. Because when I looked at it, I'm going, man, this thing, because I read the technical write up of it by the guy that wrote it. And I'm going, why? Why did you do this? Because it was flexible. In other words, it would have more records, it would have more fields for a record based on the data. Okay. So if you didn't have this kind of data, then it would shrink. Okay. And then if you had more of this kind of data, it would expand. It would have more fields, if you will. And it was very weird. So you had to look for keys in the data. So it's a little like JSON from that standpoint. You'd have something that tells you that it's the end of it because of the formatting, but it wasn't the kind of thing that was easy to interpret. And I think that's where Bradley got messed up because, he probably looked at it and parsed it based on usually when you're writing a query or something where you're going to iterate through something, you're going to go here, I'm going to go look at this. Pretend you're going through sentences and you're looking for words, right? So I want to find every instance of I in this sentence. But if all your sentences are the same length, it's easy to do, right? But if your sentences are not all the same length, it gets more difficult. And that's the way the More database was. So I think that Bradley went at it like it would be a SQL database or a standard relational database and maybe got tripped up by this flexible length of the record.
When you recovered that More database, did you run that through net analysis?
But yeah, I did.
Yeah. And did your results match Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Absolutely. Perfectly. And, outside of the fact, like I said, I got a few more records than they did. Which was not relevant, but just told me that it looked like good data. And I actually went into the database myself and verified what net analysis said it said. And if you go to the net analysis site, the dude that wrote that software, he did a highly technical review, much more than I care to go through today, about that because he felt very vindicated that net analysis parsed it correctly. And I don't blame him. That's you're trying to sell something and you did it right and the other guy did it wrong. Good for you. But it was, yeah. And like I said, it was quite the firestorm when that came out. And one of the reasons, I don't know if we even got here yet, but, I worked on that case for a long time. And then no one knew I was actually working on that case until it was over. And I kept it that way because of how acrimonious that case was. I mean, people were losing their minds over it and they were getting dangerous. And I just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah. Were people receiving death threats that were involved in the case?
Yes, to my understanding. And there was this website called Web Sleuths, if you remember them. And it had turned into a cult. I mean, it was crazy. I remember that the day that she got acquitted, later in that day, I saw on the news where someone somewhere in the Midwest thought they saw Casey Anthony get into a car and rammed it with their pickup truck. I mean, it was just
no.
that crazy. And remember, if you remember that when they acquitted her and they left the courthouse, they had to leave in a secret caravan. So they sent multiple caravans out, kind of like they were trying to hide the president during an assassination attempt. It was that crazy. So when I was in Orlando, I had to make sure that no one knew why I was there. I stayed in a safe house. So this was before Airbnb, but they actually had a house they had rented for the defense team. When I went down there, that's where we stayed. It was in a gated community. Yeah, it was good times.
Wow.
Now, some of the things that have been said about the issue with net analysis was the issues with handling the daylight savings time. And so it was an issue with the daylight savings time on that HB computer. Did you see the same time issues? Like, I shouldn't use net analysis because it's not handling daylight savings time correctly. I should try to use something else.
That would be not much of an excuse, quite frankly. I mean, there were a lot of tools that didn't handle daylight savings time back then. So, what you had to know was what was the offset from the computer time. So if the record said 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. or whatever, and the computer clock was off by 2 hours, then you would know to correct it, right? And even though the report might say 1 p.m., when you go to testify about it or actually write your report around it, you would have to say, okay, these records say 1 p.m., but when you calculate the offset, it was actually, 11 a.m. And that's the way it would have been dealt with. And that's the way it should have been dealt with.
So besides the daylight savings time, were there any other problems?
Not really that I saw with the times. One of the things that came up at trial, is my understanding, was an issue with some searches that were done related to, I think this was the foolproof suffocation or something. And it was whether or not Casey was home at the time or George was home at the time.
Okay.
And that was kind of a big discrepancy. Nobody could tell because we didn't know exactly what time the computer time was. But in reality, somebody did know, and it was in a report, and I just never got the report. So how it was not known is kind of a mystery to me because it was in one of Sanders' reports.
Now, besides, the Mork database, that Firefox history that was recovered, was there any other browser history that existed on the computer but wasn't introduced at trial?
Yeah, so they used Firefox and they used Internet Explorer, and I don't remember what version of Explorer it was. It's probably 3. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I analyzed both of them, and like I said, Internet Explorer had some odd searches in it for how to make homemade weapons for the zombie apocalypse, example. And then part of it was pesticides, part of it was for some nursing related things. Some of it was shopping, because one of the things I noticed that was Casey was shopping for toys for Kaylee and bought some not too long ago before she disappeared. And then one of the things that I probably mentioned this already, having done a lot of death penalty cases, because North Carolina has a death penalty case, and a lot of states still did back then. And by then, I had already done multiple death penalty cases and quite a few first degree cases too. And you always go through your computers and you're looking for things to help the defense or help. A lot of times I work with providing information to the psychologist or psychiatrist who's going to deal with the defendant, right? And so they're looking for that. And you get kind of used to looking for things that stick out, that don't belong, right? So, if somebody's in a discussion group talking about, how do I dispose of a body, or how much time does it take for somebody to disappear?
Right.
Things like that,
Right.
things that would stick out to you. And I never saw anything like that. Nobody looking for body bags or how to conceal something or anything like that. And in case like Casey Anthony's case, where Kaylee disappeared, one of the things that you would look for would be how to hide something or how to keep from being discovered, right? And there was nothing like that. And in the cases I've done in the past, I found things like that. else every time. Something.
Right. So, did you have to prepare? Did you have a lot to prepare for trial? What did you do for trial prep?
You're just trying to make sure that the attorney, if he's going to ask a question, that he knows what the correct answer should be, so that he understands what he should be asking and what he should be hearing. And, Jose did his own thing for the most part. But what would happen is every day, I had the evidence with me, and I had a computer with me, and I had all my forensic software with me. And you always have your key ring of dongles, right? That's the thing.
Yep.
Yep. Still have them.
Yeah. That's the
Because we're
funny
old
part.
and we don't like the cloud licenses.
That's right.
I had all of the stuff with me, and I actually had the ability to go through and reparse all that stuff. And I did. And when I first got Bradley's report, and he says, "Oh, there's 81 visits to this chloroform site," I'm going, "What the hell did I miss?" Because you always have that initial moment of freak out. It's like, wow, did they get it right and I got it wrong?
Right.
And, so that's when you go through and you dig through it again, and you may retrace your steps and completely redo the exam. And that's what I did. I completely redid the exam around that, just to make sure that whatever I was going to send Jose in there with was going to be accurate. And one of the things that would happen is every day, and man, he would come back to the house and he'd look whipped, because it was, sitting in court all day was hard. And of course, sitting out in the hallway sequester is harder.
It is.
Right.
It is.
But he would come by every night, and I was doing multiple things while I was there, because part of what I was doing also was doing all of the cellular analysis for the location work, because apparently somebody down there had done the cell phone location work. And back in those days, it wasn't like cellular analysis as now, where you get a lot of good data from the cellular companies. Back then, you got just an orientation, northern orientation or southern orientation. And that was one part that I was looking forward to. I was like, yes, because the law enforcement guy had got it upside down. And I was going to say, this is going to be so much fun. But they never did bring it in. But Jose would come by every night, and we would review whatever I had found that day or had done that day, along with whatever he wanted to know. And then he would come back by in the morning and pick up whatever I had prepped for him for court. So he may come by and say, I need this, or I want to know about that. And when we were dealing with the net analysis thing, I created a chart for him to use in court that showed, here's all the visits to MySpace, here's the chloroform site, here's MySpace. And I think that's the chart that came up in court.
I think that's where he had Stinger on the stand, and he was having him work backwards, where he had MySpace start at 84, and then he's like, and now go backwards to the next day. And I thought he was kind of rude about some of the language he used with Stinger. I'm like, I don't know that that's called for, but yes, we get your point. You're trying to say 84 minus 1 is 83 sort of situation. Okay.
Did the state fail to admit into evidence the net analysis report before the defense through the prosecution's witnesses?
Well, what happened was the prosecution never introduced a net analysis report. And because the defense did not have a witness, because our guy had bailed on us and I had been taken off the witness list, the only way to get it in was to call one of their experts back as an expert and introduce it to them.
Wow. Have you seen that done before?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Florida is an odd state. It's one of the few states where you can actually depose expert witnesses in criminal trial.
Now, did you ever track what the jury said about them rendering a not guilty verdict regarding the death of Kaylee Anthony?
Yeah, I did hear about that. And one of the things that was interesting in that trial, and something that I think some of the jurors said after the fact, once they were able to come out of hiding, I think, because people were mad at them big time. And I think they got death threats.
Oh, okay.
But one of the things that was a big factor in that case, I think the digital forensics was a big factor, but the other thing that was a big factor was all these other novel forensics things they tried to bring in that were untested and untried. The issue that the jurors brought up was that, well, a couple of things happened in that case that really threw things for a loop. But one of the things that was a big issue was the fact that they never got a cause of death for Kaylee. So without having a cause of death, they couldn't determine if she had died through nefarious means or through an accident uh, or anything else. I mean, if she had died just in an accident, then the worst thing that would have been would just been, hiding the body, kill, because you got to prove that she was actually murdered in order to get a homicide verdict, right? So, and they couldn't prove that. They just proved they found her, she was dead, but they couldn't prove how, and they couldn't prove why or anything. I think that's where the case fell apart. And the chloroform was such a big part of the prosecution theory because they said, well, she went to this website and learned how to make chloroform. So she was given Kaylee chloroform so she could hide her in the trunk and go party, and she died in there. And that
Oh,
was
well,
kind of
did you hear the thing about, I'm sure if people are familiar with the nanny thing. She said, oh, I dropped her off with the nanny and then I never saw her again. And people were saying Zanny the nanny. And then they were saying her friends were like, oh my God, she's using Zantac to make her child sleep / pass out. They thought that's why it was Zanny the nanny.
Who knows? I mean, maybe there was some Xanax involved.
But you didn't see any computer searches for it that you recall.
Nope, nothing related to drugs. And, plenty of those pictures from the parties, she was, I didn't get a chance to talk to Casey, but my understanding is that she couldn't tell you her name without lying about it. And I've known people like that. I've had, worked cases where the defendant was like that, where they couldn't say a sentence without lying. And I don't think they know any better, and what's the definition of a what kind of liars that they lie when the truth would have served them better, so that's kind of where she was.
So other than everything that you've told us and some craziness from this case, was there anything else that really just surprised?
I was in a hotel somewhere up north, and just walking in, some guy about my age came in, and he was driving a pretty hot car. I said, man, it's a nice car. And he says, thank you. And we were standing in the lobby talking, and I don't know how it came up, something about the Anthony case. And he says, well, she did it, and she did. I said, I don't know that she did it. I said, I worked on the case a long time, and I still don't know what happened. He said, well, she did it. He said something that offended me. I said, I really don't care what you think. I worked on that trial, like I said, for over 2 years, and I had a lot of conversations with Jose. And I would be in Jose's car when he's talking to other people on the trial or on the case and on the team. And one of the things that you do, and this is true a lot of times in the cases that I've worked with, is you do your work and then you move on. And the case might still be going on, right? I mean, it hasn't gone to trial yet. You did your work a year before, and if you're not going to testify, you're doing something else, right? So you may never know what actually happened. There have been cases where I've been so deeply involved. And at the end of the day, you have to tell people sometimes the only people that know really what happened is the victim and the murderer, period. No one else will ever know. And that's what happened in the Casey Anthony case. And the most shocking thing to me, and I started, I guess, to drink the media Kool-Aid, was when she got acquitted. Because I heard so much against her constantly that I didn't think she could get a fair trial. And I didn't see how, independent of the evidence, I thought she was going to get convicted. And we've all seen cases where somebody got convicted independent of the evidence, right?
That's right.
And some of the best cases I ever worked was where I got people out on the habeas that should never gone to prison. So,
well, Larry, I think you mentioned something like, on this case, you were a lot more into it and you kind of stayed with it versus other cases. And this was my experience in the FBI is I'm just working so many things. I'm doing it. I didn't know what happened with like 95% of my cases that I worked, but now, and I was so far removed from everything. But now that I do stuff independently, I'll have some criminal cases. I'm much more involved, have much more touch base. And then I'm like talking back and forth with the lawyers, and it inevitably goes down a tangent. It's not strictly business. So they, there's just much more personal involvement, not like personal nature, but I mean, you're just much more in it and interacting with people, which is so different than my experience in the FBI.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because some cases, and you end up doing weird things in our business over the years. Some of the cases that I've done, the service that I've had to provide was to sit down with the defendant and his wife and his parents and explain to them why he's going to prison. Okay. Because he doesn't want to tell them the truth because he's too embarrassed, right? Or you sit down with an attorney and a defendant, and the attorney's trying really hard to help him, and the defendant's just being a jerk to him. And some of those defendants are the ones that I'm happy to see go to jail and go to prison forever, because that's where they belong. And the way that all the twists and turns of some of these cases are so interesting. And I did a case years ago where I ended up having to go buy a shotgun after the case because I was concerned about my safety.
Yeah.
And you just never know what's going to happen, right?
You don't.
That's right.
Now, have you done any additional work or any other investigations consulting with this legal team or any of the different members of that legal team?
I did. The second time that Aaron Hernandez was tried for homicide, I caught that case with Jose. And I didn't testify in that case. One of the guys on our team did. But I started on the case and I did the work. And then I turned it over to Jake Green, who testified. And Aaron Hernandez got acquitted. And the reason he got acquitted was because the things that they thought were very helpful for the prosecution turned out to be not so helpful with the internet records and things like that, because they didn't do the time offsets, because internet records can be very strange, right? Especially if you're crossing state lines. It's kind of like cell tower records when you have a switch that's sitting right on the boundary, or if you got a switch that's in Atlanta, but the phone's in New Orleans, but the switch doesn't care and you have to manually fix it. So things like that.
Yeah. So you've talked about working on with other high profile cases. How many additional high profile cases have you worked?
I can just list a few for you. I did the Colorado theater shooting,
Okay.
which involved doing 300 hours worth of work.
Oh my goodness.
Just to do all of the data analysis, because I was putting together all of the data analysis from the phones and the computers into a single database that was searchable for the attorneys.
Wow.
And then I did the Charleston church shooting.
Oh,
I did the Pittsburgh Trio Life case. I did the, name a bunch of high profile cases. I was probably the defense expert on.
Oh my goodness. You're all over the country.
Yeah, I did.
That's awesome.
I did a serial arsonist out in California. It turned out to be a fireman that was setting fires.
I think I remember that.
I do too.
That was a long time ago too.
Yeah.
I did.
I might have been in LA then. Maybe that's why I remember.
Could be. I've done a lot of high profile cases over the years. And I did the case that was the largest breach in NSA history. They lost 40 terabytes of classified data.
Oh my goodness.
So I was their defense expert.
Yes.
Larry, we're going to throw a question at you. Just your opinion. Do you think this case would have had a different outcome today with the capabilities that our tools have now, and then even the advancements in our training that we can take?
No, not at all. And the reason for it is because even though our tools have changed a little, the data hasn't changed. So there wasn't something else to find in that case that would have made a difference in the computers and cell phones, because it just wasn't there. I mean, it's the beauty of things back then is the hard drives weren't as big. We didn't have as much social media. We didn't have all the chat apps that we have today. We didn't have encryption. We didn't have all the barriers of doing good forensics today, and the complexities. I mean, because back then you didn't have, a 500 million apps on the App Store. So,
yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, it was a lot simpler back then. I mean, not necessarily easier, but it was just not what it is today. And a lot of it too, the tools again don't really make the case. I mean, it's really the examiner. I mean, when you go in to look at a case, you have a good example is you can take a framing hammer and you can build a house or you can build a bank, right? But your approach is not the same. And that's the way forensics is. I mean, you have to go in you're doing a financial case, you're going to do it this way. You're doing a homicide, you're going to do it that way. You're doing CSAM, you're going to do it a different way. And you're going to be looking for something different, and your approach will be different. So it's the examiner. It's just learning to use the tools is the easy part.
That's right.
Well, Larry, we've reached the end of our questions.
Yeah, Larry, thank you so much for going through this with us. Obviously, I had no idea until Stacy and I started talking about, let's talk about the Casey Anthony case. So we really appreciate you coming on and walking us through some of this, even though the testimony was different and your role was a little different. It still gave us a good understanding of what happened. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it was absolutely fun. I enjoy this kind of thing. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys. And I hope that people enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate that.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us to get notified the next time a new episode drops. If you can do more, head on over to parsingthetruth.com and donate by clicking on the donate button. Parsing the Truth is a nonprofit organization, and we are raising money to send a new digital forensic examiner to IASIS training next year in Orlando. Thanks.